Thank you so much for coming out tonight, everybody. My name is Clay, and it is my honor to introduce our two guests for the evening. And I'm going to embarrass them terribly because they're not here yet. They're in the back, in the wings, waiting for me to read their bios and introduce them. So without any further ado, I'm going to start. When I call your names, gentlemen, please press your video screens. But Broadleaf Writers Association founder and executive director Zachary Steele has been featured by NPR, the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, Publishers Weekly, Baby Got Books, Shelf Awareness, Writers Magazine, and was nominated for the Sidewise Award for Alternate Fiction. The Weight of Ashes is his third novel. Currently, he is hard at work on the first book in his upcoming fantasy series, The Fallen Hero, for release in 2022. You can follow his ramblings on writing and life at ZacharySteele.com. Everybody, please welcome Zachary. Yay! The virtual applause.
It was the best intro ever.
Oh, but it's not over yet.
Oh, okay.
There's still one more person to be introduced. I think everyone's like saving the applause for when you're both on screen. So
it's also saving the best for last.
No. We're gonna play tug of war with this all night. I can tell. No. You go. No. You go. As a child, growing up in the South, journalist, storyteller, and playwright Benji Carr developed an eye for the bizarre and the quirky, which provided all of the fodder for the stories he told his friends and family. His eclectic body of work, which includes personal tales of struggle and survival, or fiction about cannibal lunch ladies, puppet romances, drag queen funerals, and perverted killer circus clowns, was featured in The Guardian, Arts ATL, and Pembroke Magazine. He also told these stories at Carapace. Oh my God, am I gonna mispronounce? Carapace. Oh my God, points for me taken off.
It's a turtle shell.
The moth, don't forget the moth. Where am I losing my place? Right Club Atlanta. And on stage, his pieces were presented at the Center for Puppetry Arts, Michael Haverty, the Alliance Theater, and as part of the Samuel French Off-Broadway Short Play Festival in Manhattan. He lives in Atlanta and helps run the online literary magazine Gut Wrench Journal. Impacted is his debut novel. Please, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the stage, Benji Carr.
Excellent. He's also the creator of the best essay on the Waffle House ever.
Where can one find this essay on the best Waffle House ever, or the best essay about Waffle House ever? The best Waffle House ever.
I will have to go through my archives. I have not performed it since
Wordsmith
2015. No, I performed.
Oh, you did it after?
Once.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Is it amazing that you can have a piece that sits on whatever the proverbial shelf, and then someone else says, "Hey, I take requests. Can you do that that one from 2015?" That's gotta feel pretty good.
Yeah. No, there was this guy that used to work at Zach's store his name was Russ Marshallek, and every now and then he would ask for me to bring out the Waffle House story again. And I'm like, well, but haven't I done that? And he's like, oh, come on. You have to play the hits. And I was like,
I feel like we would be so lucky to have one radio hit. I would be so happy to be the one hit wonder, frankly. So Congratulations on having the Waffle House. But we also have some new hits coming out for you. Now, I'm just gonna say it. this is all about these two gentlemen tonight. I am going to try to step back as much as humanly possible so that we can share the release of these two amazing novels that I have had the extremely good fortune to read. And I'm hoping that you tuning in tonight will as well, if you haven't already. We're gonna have some readings, maybe do a little kind of chat about the writing process, what got us to this point, and then do a little Q&A. And so if you do have any questions, just below your Zoom screen, there is a nice, lovely Q&A function. If you just throw your questions in there, I will be fielding them at the tail end of the evening. But I think it's story time, guys. I don't know about you, but I kind of want to hear some fiction. If I'm remembering correctly, Zach, you drew the short straw. Are you?
I did draw the short straw.
Okay.
Actually, I voluntarily let somebody else draw first and ended up with only the short straw.
There was one
straw. If you
straw.
want to go first, you can go first. It's fine.
Oh yeah, no, I don't mind. I'll go first.
No, you go first. No.
I insist.
Please,
I insist.
After you. I'm going to be shameless. I'm actually going to read the back cover. If you haven't already guessed, I'm like woefully underprepared for tonight. I should have all this memorized at this point. But I'm going to read the back of The Weight of Ashes, and then Zach, you're going to take us away, correct?
I will take you away.
Yay! Okay, so without any further ado, after a car accident claims his older brother's life, Mark Murphy's world is turned upside down. The silence of their shared bedroom, the memories of Mitch's guidance, and his mother's drunken spiral are constant reminders of the cost of his absence. But Mark isn't ready to grieve. He isn't ready to accept that his brother is truly gone. Despite the insistence of the adults in his life that he accept Mitch's death, Mark is undeterred. They don't know what he knows. They don't know the story of the witch on Spook Hill. Aided by his loyal band of misfit friends, Mark's plan to carry Mitch's ashes to the witch is complicated by the pursuit of the town sheriff and the cousin responsible for his brother's death. With no time to regroup, Mark and his friends must navigate the dangerous path to Spook Hill before the sun sets, so that Mitch can be resurrected in exchange for the life of the one who took it. So without any further ado, Zachary, please take us away.
And then when we're done, we're going to record that, and I'm going to use it every single time I have to read. Thank you. All right, I'm going to read from the second chapter. The first chapter is actually only the first page and a half or so, so we're kind of jumping straight into it from there. When I shifted, the pew creaked. Reminded me of a door opening in a haunted house, slow and eerie. Still, it was more comforting than her silence, more comforting than the bleak organ music that filled the sanctuary. Any bit of sound otherwise was crying, most of which came from Tracy Stevens. Mascara streaked her face in shades of blue and black. Her cheeks were puffy, blonde hair blasted with hairspray and unlikely to ever move again. I don't know if Tracy was ever Mitch's girlfriend, but they were close. Had been for years. Few of her friends formed a tight group around her, while bawling away as if tears were breath. Maybe they knew Mitch. Maybe Tracy's sobs got to them. But the commotion certainly made the other kids in the church stare forward as if there was nothing else to look at, blank as could be. Like they were hit by a shoe and weren't sure how to react. From my pew a few rows from the back, it all looked like a show. Mama stood near the pulpit, unbalanced and fighting it, decorative white wooden box on a tall oak stand at her side. Mitch's ashes were in there, in a sealed bag. I hadn't looked at them, didn't need to. From the time she'd picked them up, Mama had kept the box close by, barely letting it down. Even to sleep, she'd set it centered on the dresser at the foot of her bed, where she could see it. Wet trails streaked her cheeks, bald hands tied around a wad of used tissues, shaking slightly, but she looked pretty. It had been a long while since I'd seen her in a dress. This one was black and almost to the floor. I think it was new. I couldn't remember seeing it before. To her side, Reverend Mills loomed, long face working that practiced, somber grin he probably learned in Reverend school. People usually bought into it, somehow felt better no matter what was ailing them. I just wanted him to go away. He'd been trying to talk to me about Mitch every time I was within earshot. Kept feeding Mama lines about heaven and Mitch being home with Jesus. Buried in his ways he couldn't possibly understand. He didn't know what I knew. Mitch always said that was a problem with church folk. They're all just waiting in a line. They're not supposed to leave, just living to die. He told me to live, stay out of lines. There's more than one road home, and more to cheat death. You sure about? I mean, how do you know? Reggie was always the first to speak. Not that she talked too much, just first, whether you wanted her to or not. I wanted to look at her, but couldn't bring myself to. I'd never seen her hair out of pigtails or not covered by a ball cap. It hung long over her shoulders like black silk, shiny and stark against her pale blue dress. Her grandma was a full-blooded Cherokee. Reggie got her dark eyes and tan skin. Despite that, the rosy shade of her cheeks flared like heat, eyes made up. It was stupid, I knew, but it felt like she was in costume, like she was someone else. She was Regina, a girl I'd never met that made me stupid nervous for some reason. Not the friend I'd had since second grade, the friend I'd spent more alone time with than anyone. No wherever boys and girls and sticky, gross feelings that made me sweat. Now my palms were slick, no matter how much I rubbed them on the legs of my trousers. So I just listened and stared at a hymnal tucked in the back of the pew ahead. If I only heard her voice, it was still Reggie. Seen it, I said, voice barely above a whisper. She can do it. But how? Reggie dropped into quiet, fiddled with the fluffy hem of her dress. Mitch isn't, well, I mean, he's not. How can she even make that happen now? Dunk turned a bit her way, his wide frame rocking the entire pew, buttons threatening to pop free of his pinstripe dress shirt. Phoenix rises from the ashes. Why can't Mitch? Yeah, I know, but Reggie stopped short again, but she didn't need to finish. I knew what she would have said. She was always good at that kind of thing. Changed direction like a bird in flight. But I knew how she flew. Spook Hill's a long way. Has to be 6 miles or so. 4. Mitch said it takes about 3+ hours by foot, since we have to cut through the woods. And if it's still raining, it'll stop. Their stares fell on me heavy. I could only look at Reggie for a flash. Something in the way she looked at me was different. Seemed to probe deeper, kind of like a look, trying to be a hug. It was weird, and I didn't like it. Dunk and Mo stayed silent, sitting just past her, waiting, smart enough to know that she'd talk again before they could anyway. Saw it on the news. She didn't let up. She never let up. Spook Hill's big, Mark. How are we supposed to find her? Map. Mitch drew it. He's good with maps. For a second, Mo looked ready to say something. His thick lips opened and closed as he pushed his large glasses as high up as they went. The frames were as dark as his skin, sometimes nearly impossible to see. No words to offer, he pressed his suit, leaned back, and all but vanished behind Dunk. Not a hard thing to do when you're as small as he was. I knew it well. We were both short and scrawny and as easy to miss as a frog with no croaker. Thunder rattled the stained glass windows, giving the kaleidoscope Jesus behind the choir seats good shake. Tracy squealed, then wailed even louder. Another group of people passed through the vestibule and into the sanctuary, on a line down the aisle past us. I steadied my gaze on the cover of the hymnal, unwilling to make eye contact. I didn't want anyone else offering me condolences that weren't necessary. I mean, we'll go, said Reggie, giving a good puff of sigh for effect. Whatever you need. In agreement, round cheeks hot pink and wobbling along. Mo had to lean forward for me to see him doing the same, though with that half smile of his that said he wasn't sold. Reggie noted Mama with a quick nod. She won't be happy with you. She'll be happier when I come back with Mitch. Reggie shifted a touch toward me, our elbows grazing, ready to lower her voice to say something practical I wouldn't want to hear, but a sharp yelp cut her off. Almost sheltered behind the pulpit, Mama cradled the white box, whispering something to Reverend Mills. Like a soldier on orders, he stepped into the aisle, hand out, palm to the shoulder of a small woman that clearly wanted nothing to do with him. If it had only been her screeching protest, I'd still have known it was Aunt Dawn. Her voice cracked when she screamed, which was often, as if she'd caught a cough that wouldn't quit. Behind her, Gordon backed off, a few easy steps at a time, head on a slow swivel. Gave the impression he was checking to see who was watching. But I knew better. He was looking past everyone, looking for me. I'd never much cared for the way he stared at me, especially since the day at the ball field, like he was thinking of all the ways he could get back at me for ending his chances at playing professional ball. There in the commotion of the sanctuary gave my heart a skip, burned me from the inside out. I wanted to hurt him. I wanted Mitch's green Easton bat so I could finish the job and crack open Gordon's head. But I couldn't. He had to be alive or none of it would matter. Cuts lined Gordon's face and neck as if he'd gone to war with a feral cat. His left arm was in a sling, same as the one he wore for 6 weeks after I cracked his shoulder blade in April. He'd only had it free for 3 weeks. He shouldn't have come. Neither of them should have. He was the reason we were there at all. Aunt Dawn made a wild attempt to force herself around the Reverend, who, to his credit, wrapped her up with his long arms and swept her away. Another time, he said, calm as anything, as if this sort of thing happened all the time. With the exception of Tracy and Aunt Dawn, the entire sanctuary had fallen stone silent, but Tracy went bawling louder, as though she'd just heard the news all over again, like this was about her. I need to see her. Let me go. Aunt Dawn landed a solid elbow to the Reverend's ribs, and he buckled down to a knee, struggling to find breath as Aunt Dawn bowled him over to get to Mama. Morgan, please. Mama turned the white box away in a flash, climbed the 3 steps to the stage, and backed away, head shaken. I can't talk to you. Her voice dropped to a whimper behind a fresh wash of tears. I'd never seen her this way, and it drove my temper to boiling hot. Right now. Mitch would have put a stop to it straight off, would have put himself between Mama and a grizzly, but I didn't move. I just sat there beside my friends, fists clenched, all 4 of us watching it like it was the most intense episode of the Wonder Years we'd ever seen. Aunt Dawn kneeled at the base of the steps, repeated cries of, please, drowned out by sobs. Mama had all but backed into the choir seats. The Reverend found his footing at Aunt Dawn's side at a distance, trying to encourage her away. Gordon, on the other hand, worked his way up the aisle, away from Aunt Dawn's outbursts as if he hardly knew her. Taking his cue as an opportunity of their own, a few folks rose from the pews and filed out ahead of Gordon. He clipped Mrs. Wilkins' walker, and she made a fuss, but her teeth weren't in. Whatever she said was done and over in a hurry, not that Gordon was listening. There was a moment when he stopped, hand flipped through his blonde hair, bloodshot blue eyes looking down on me, when I could have sworn he wasn't bothered by any of it, that he could have cared less what happened to Mitch, could have cared less who it hurt. Maybe I'd known him too long to think otherwise. Mitch always said Gordon carried his heart like it was a grenade. Let's talk. His voice was softer than normal, but still sharp and to the point, quieter version of his mother. I tried to think of all the things Mitch might say, but in the ruckus, I couldn't focus. Murph, let's go. He flinched, triggered by another volley of wails from Aunt Dawn. This place gives me the creeps. He doesn't want to talk to you. Dunk stood, filling the aisle as fast as I'd ever seen him move. His thick arms bowed, fists balled, cheeks red hot. For a 13-year-old kid, Dunk was strong. He said it was from working so often at construction with his dad. Stuff it more, Size. Nobody's asking. It's Size more, shot Reggie up as well. The smile on Gordon's face made me sick, as did the way he eyed her. Well, you are a pretty little Indian girl after all, aren't you? If you ever want to be a woman, go away. The hymnal flew in a flutter of pages, as much a shock to me as anyone. I didn't even realize I'd grabbed it. It collected Gordon's shoulder with a thud. He yelped, nearly drawing his arm free of the sling, only to yell louder as the pain from his shoulder blade kicked in. This is your fault, and you're going to pay for it. Once the worst of the pain subsided, he laughed, a slow and amused chuckle. I wanted to throw up. Do you think it was a joke? Pay. What do you think you're going to do, runt nuts? Mo moved to block his path, but was hardly a match. Gordon shoved him hard to the pew with ease, raised the back of his free hand to strike Dunk clear. That was as far as he got. Aunt Dawn's palm found his cheek with a swipe of her left hand, turned his head in a quick snap. The pop was loud enough to silence the rain. Gordon looked onto me like I was the one who'd hit him. In the car. Now. Aunt Dawn's voice emerged all breath, a growl that somehow filled the room. A red welt rose from ear to chin, but Gordon didn't reach for it. He barely reacted at all. Instead, he withdrew back and clear until he dropped from sight. Fierceness in Aunt Dawn's face faded, skin washed pale, tears streaking rapid. She cast a final look at Mama, then briefly at me like I was supposed to come in for a hug. And she turned and stormed out. As soon as the door shut behind her, the rain let its breath free and fell heavy once again. If I wasn't ready before, I was now. The wrong person was in that oak box. Mitch deserved better, and I was going to make sure he got it. And tomorrow, I said to my friends, at the junkyard, we'll head to the mall from there. A nod passed from Reggie to Dunk to Mo. Then I worked my way free to tend to Mama.
Yes.
Thank you.
Lordy. Runt nuts. That's going to echo through my head. Runt nuts is going to echo through my head for a long time.
Yes.
We're going to do more questions later, but I have to ask beforehand, it's so interesting because of course, when, we write these books and they just so happen to be written in first person narrative, the character, essentially kind of takes the reader's hand and says, I'm going to guide you through this story I'm about to tell. But hearing you read it out loud, all of a sudden there's this kind of life that's lived in that kind of like takes what's on the page and kind of elevates it. So I'm really curious. Like as soon as I started hearing the twang, I was like, oh, he's going there, he's doing it. How, in terms of the process, in terms of the writing of this book, were you kind of cognizant of that voice? Was that there from the get-go? Did you read it out loud as you wrote? Like where did the character come and where did the voice come?
Forgive this temporary deflection, but you as a performer, and a good one at that, understand that the character tells you who they are. And I actually had written the first chapter, the first page and a half, and it sat for a long time before I ever wrote the rest of it. But every time I read it, that was the only thing I could hear. And maybe that's a product of having grown up in environs like that, where those were the people that I knew. But I don't know, I had tried to read it to myself without the accent, and somewhere in the middle it always comes in, and I can't really prevent it, and I think it fits perfectly.
Yeah. Has there been any kind of conversation with readers in terms of like what they hear? Like now, if I crack this book open, I'm going to hear you, and it's always a fun kind of challenge of like, how does the author kind of imbue that voice in the text and let it somehow kind of like inhabit the reader's minds? Have you engaged yet with readers who talk about the
because
book?
Obviously the book isn't actually out yet. So I haven't really had that opportunity to have that widespread conversation with readers, but beta readers and, the wonderful author friends I have who read and blurbed for it, I haven't really had anybody specifically say one way or the other. Then again, I feel like you said, hearing me read a certain way will probably forever leave that voice in whoever's here in their heads.
Do the audiobook.
It's possible. It is possible. It is possible.
To me, Mark's voice always sounded younger and lighter, but also had this playful sense to it as it was playing in my head. Just to give you reader feedback.
Sure, yeah, no, I appreciate that.
We're going to actually, Zach, this is all a pretense. Benji and I are going to actually give you our feedback on your book. So I hope you're ready. I have some notes that I've written here.
Just remember, I control the power of this program. I can unplug it as quickly as, no, I'm just joking.
And that was a short presentation. No, but it's funny. Like I'm gonna shift after this, I swear. But like, for me, when I read it, and I this is kind of a cheap shot because it's in the blurb that I blurbed, but like I feel as if, and you mentioned the Wonder Years, which even of itself, like there is this narrative trope for maybe it's a particular generation, I don't know, but like there is the idea of the adult narrator kind of reflecting back on childhood. So I think of the Stephen King's The Body. I think of Wonder Years, where there's a certain kind of narrative overlap of like what we're seeing, which is like the story of children or youth, but overlaid with this kind of adult, kind of mature removal from it. So it allows the narrator to kind of comment on the action of what's happening, but also
And I had originally started writing this in present tense, which I'd never in my life done. And about halfway through, it just wasn't working. And the reason I had chosen present tense was because I want the reader to be in Mark's head. I wanted them to only know what Mark knows. And I realized that I didn't need to do present tense to do that. And I kind of liked that. And the Wonder Years is a great reference there, that Wonder Years approach of like, I'm just going to relive this with you without really giving anything away.
Well then, Zach, thank you very much.
Sir.
We'll come back to you later, sir.
All right.
I would like to bring Benji on.
All right, Benji, it's all
because
yours.
we're going to talk about Impacted. I'm going to read the back, and I just want to do one last double check. I don't want to give anything away that's too much. Do you want me to read like
It's
a part
fine.
of it?
It's on the back.
Okay.
And it helped me select what it is that I'm going to read. So
Great.
So go right ahead.
All right. Well, I'm going to read the back cover to set the stage for those watching at home. With every trip he makes to the dentist, Wade's pain only gets worse. His smile has faded. He's clenching his jaw and grinding his teeth more, not because of bad oral hygiene or any mishaps in orthodontics. Wade's teeth don't need straightening out, but the rest of his life could use that kind of adjustment. Wade has fallen in love with handsome Dr. Emmett, and their office visits in the afternoon have become decidedly more personal than professional. And poor Wade is sure his girlfriend Jessa would punch him in the mouth if she found out. After all, Jessa did just abandon her church and her family to be with him. And she did just have Wade's baby. So their relationship has already caused enough gossip in the small Georgia town of Waverly. When Wade tries to end the affair, the breakup takes a brutal turn, leaving Wade in a state of panic. His life is under threat. His secrets could be exposed, and his family may fall apart before he realizes what kind of person he wants to be. So without any further ado, ladies and gentlemen, let's hear from Benji Carr reading from Impacted.
Thank you. I love that guy's voice. If you ever get a chance to listen to one of his audiobooks where he's one of the narrators, by all means do that. He's absolutely terrific. I'm going to read from a later section of the book about a character who comes into play. When Celeste was growing up, her mother used to fret endlessly about how the girl spent her free time. She'd eye the Lois Duncan and Stephen King books warily, as though they were weapons, or worse, cigarettes. The VHS copies of Nightmare on Elm Street and Jagged Edge troubled her so much that she wouldn't even read the plot descriptions. Celeste spent her evenings glued to cop shows, murder mysteries, and Lifetime movies. Mama would say, "Looking at all that stuff is going to warp you. No wonder you're depressed. All that violence and sadness." Now, Celeste didn't think that there was any danger in stories warping her any more than the world would itself, same as it does to everyone. But Mama didn't want to hear any arguments. She would just worry that her daughter wasn't normal. Mama spent her nights reading Harlequin romance novels filled with happy endings and great kisses, Celeste thought, but those books never taught her mother how to pick a good man, so there. Celeste believed that violence in media didn't create a violent, abusive, or sad world, it just reflected it back. And Celeste was fascinated by the darkness of the world, the secrets that normal people had to hide. Thus, she took it all in, the shows, the books, the movies. She found it an easy way to experience situations and relate to feelings without having to actually suffer through them. Stories teach compassion, Celeste learned, but her mother wouldn't hear it. Reading anything darker than Nancy Drew was just going to ruin her. Her mother would lecture, "Good girls don't spend their time studying these monsters." It would just cause Celeste to turn up the volume on Cagney and Lacey. Now, if what her mother believed was true, Celeste had been preparing to kill a man since middle school. And I'm going to stop that brief excerpt and let you know that the book is currently on sale. But before I go on, may I indulge in something just for the sake of Zach Steele and Monica and everyone else?
Go for it, Benji.
All right. I believe in the Church of Waffle House. My communion tastes best with margarine and maple syrup. At my church, you don't have to put 25 cents in the jukebox if you want to hear Creedence sing a hymn. I believe in doors with locks that are never needed nor used. I believe in hash browns, scattered, smothered, and covered. I believe a never-ending cup of coffee should cost 99 cents. I believe in the use of so much grease on food that it will occasionally make you sick. I believe in being able to sit and listen to a panicked waitress talk on the phone about someone in her family having parole trouble and wondering how she's going to make this month's payment on the double wide. I believe in getting scared, making eye contact in the dark hours of morning with someone who looks like a Hell's Angel but seems to be enjoying his grits. I believe that my friends and I will always, no matter how old we are, always be able to go into a Waffle House and reflect on our shared history while looking at the shiny gloss of one of those not quite plastic, not quite wood tabletops. I believe that a town in Georgia hasn't truly succeeded until it has a Waffle House on both sides of its interstate overpass. The best drag queen I've ever seen was dressed as my kind of saint. A Waffle House waitress, lipstick-stained Marlboro dangling from her mouth, and a freshly brewed pot of decaf attached permanently to her left hand. Waffle House is my past, Waffle House is my present, and though I hate to admit this, I will always carry some part of Waffle House with me into the future forever, wherever that may be. And that's where I'm going to stop with that.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
You got to
And
play
that's
the
all,
hits.
folks. Tthanks for coming out tonight. No. There's no topping that. That's
I can't beat that. I can't beat that.
You cheated, Benji. You cheated.
Ain't no rules.
There are no rules. There's no rules here. But it's really interesting. I mean, like I feel like, you know, these two books kind of being brought together tonight and kind of like putting them on the pedestal together. Like it's amazing how there's certain kind of comparisons, contrasts. Like what I love about Impacted and hearing it out loud, I feel as if I'm gonna make a broad sweeping statement and you either agree or disagree with me, Benji. But I feel like you have this sense of humor that is so razor thin and potentially dry that for someone to read it, they might say like, oh, this is almost profane, where someone else will be like rolling in the aisles laughing. And I wonder how, I've been really curious to talk to you about comedy, and particularly dark comedy, because I feel like it is something that, with the work of yours that I'm familiar with, you know, your work tends to kind of elicit a big response, but it goes places, and it can kind of be very cathartic, but it can also be like, it's almost like a litmus test for the reader or the audience to be like, you know, do you find that funny? I kind of find it funny. Does that say something about me? Is that wrong? Where does comedy come from for you?
I was born disabled, and as a result of that, I used to wobble from room to room everywhere I went once I finally learned to walk. And when I was 3, I had a surgery, and they put me in a double leg cast with a bar in between my legs. And so my parents used to carry me around in this like little red wagon, and I looked like a giant letter A, but luckily my mother had me watching The Electric Company and Sesame Street and The Letter People. And so it just felt like my giant double leg cast where I couldn't move and was 3 was just a teaching opportunity. And in addition to that, my father used to use the bar and just carry me around upside down like a suitcase because I thought it was fun, and who knows what kind of brain damage that might have caused. But from that, learning to adapt to try and get people to pay more attention to how loud I am, as opposed to talking down to me like I'm the most Southern person in the world. God bless you and bless your heart, you perfect little angel. I'm just like, screw that. No. We're going to be blunt. Then I accidentally made the mistake of going to work for newspapers after that. And if you aren't sarcastic working in a news office, you will be by the time you finish one shift.
That's amazing.
I always kind of equated Benji's use of humor to something in the vein of Stephen Wright. You know, that dark, dry kind of thing where you're like, God, that's horrible, but why do I want to laugh at that?
Well, it becomes, not only is it like a line in the sand that you basically are defying your reader to cross it. It's like, here's the line, will you come with me? But once they do, if they do, I feel like what you've done is kind of create a bond with your reader that you know, they're readers for life. And I think that, like, you know, it's, some people will be like, oh, Stephen Wright, it's such an acquired taste. But I love Stephen Wright, and like,
exactly.
I love Impact. Yeah. I love Impacted, and it's like, it's the challenge that is put out there. It's like, I defy you to laugh at this. And when you do, you are of my tribe. You are one of my people. And I don't know, it's a great feeling, I would imagine.
Mm-hmm.
I have coworkers who like, even back at Barnes and Noble, who used to think that I was the most horrible person, just in general. But the thing was that I would say these terrible things just to get them to play back to me.
Yeah.
And so if I find someone who can spar, then we're good. And a couple of days ago, someone asked me about, someone from the AJC asked me about Zach and how long we'd known each other and how long we'd been friends, and like where we found common ground. And I was basically like, both of us made fun of the same book in the same way for 20 to 21 years. It's the worst book ever written. And
you're going to tell us what it is, right?
Hell yes.
I don't know.
Do you want this? Okay.
I mean, did you talk to the AJC about it? I don't really think that holding back here is necessary.
Well, I know, but it's also your moment, and I don't know how much you want to share your moment.
I have shared this moment with so many people that it is all of our moments.
All right.
But it is simply put the worst book ever written. It is so bad it comes all the way around to iconic.
Do you have it? I only have it on my Kindle
we're not,
for $3.99.
Okay. We're not breaking it out or reading it or anything like that. That's
all right.
Stop building the suspense, guys. Come on. Just say the name of the book.
All right. It is a book. It came out in the year 2000, and the author came and did a signing at the Barnes and Noble where Zach and I both worked. It was an iUniverse self-published book. It is what happens. It's a Christian end times fiction pontificating what happens if the rapture hits during a traffic jam on 285.
Places, but yes.
That among other places, but yeah. We get the rapture happening, and like the main character is named Dakota Cross, and he's a former government agent who also fights these false ninjas in a print shop in the first chapter. It's baffling, but it also has such audacity that,
I mean, if it's transcendent, then I think we're, I was like, it's going to be Twilight. It's going to be 50 Shades of something.
No, this is a self-published book.
No. If I can quote one section from memory without ever having to actually open the book. Dakota runs up upon a woman lying in the middle of the street, and he's looking for his wife and his children who have gone missing from the back of his car. He grabs her by the shoulder and turns her over, and she yells out, my baby, have you seen my baby? It was right here in my womb.
I'm just going to go on record as saying, if someone could quote my work years after the fact,
21 years later,
regardless of whether they appreciate it or not, I would say mission accomplished.
That's what I said all the way around. But anyway, moving on.
But I digress.
Yes.
I feel like there's a story here that should be shared between the two of you, which is kind of what brings us to this point in our lives. Broadleaf Writers is definitely the kind of the foundation for so much and for so many different authors. It's nice to kind of have the ability to kind of tell your own origin story. So I want to ask you both, this feels like a kind of joint storytelling session. So, can you both tell us how Broadleaf kind of came into your life and brought these books to fruition?
Well, I think I'll just say, I mean, Clay, and I actually see a couple people, including the leader of the organization, Catherine, in the crowd here. But James River Writers was my first experience with a writing organization that really fostered a sense of community and family and connectivity and all of that. And I just fell in love with it. And actually almost moved to Richmond on a couple of occasions, but wanted to stay in the Atlanta area and figured if I was going to stay here and it didn't have what I was looking for, then I needed to just create it. And so my mission for about a year and a half was to create the platform for it all, and also to learn how to run a nonprofit, because that's kind of important. And then when it launched, I had like 5 board members to start with, and I think like within a few months you joined, right?
You asked me to be on the conference committee the first year, and then after the conference, you asked me to join the board itself.
Yeah. And so Benji's been on the board for 5 of the 6 years the organization has been in existence.
But I've been involved from the beginning, which is how I got to know Clay, and also how I got to know Jessica Nettles there in the chat. We worked the front table greeting everyone, and have every year since, just because we have a blast doing it. For me, I'm going to start the origin story of Zach and his influence specifically on my writing, by evoking the name of his old bookstore, Wordsmith's Books, from Decatur, which is where he heard me perform the Waffle House essay, which is like the first thing that I ever read at an open mic that I had done. There were a lot of attendees at the open mic. Most of them were terrifying. And as a result of that, when Wordsmiths moved locations, the open mic went away, and he started booking me and the storyteller Will Young for separate events, so that way we didn't have any Christian rock singers singing songs like "Get on My Knees for Jesus." Sorry. I will never forget that. Anyway.
Yeah, no, I know.
Yes. But
anyway,
because I ended up at that open mic, then I eventually found other shows like Write Club Atlanta and Carapace, and as a result of that, I ended up connecting to the Live Lit community and people like Michael Haverty, that Clay knows. Michael Haverty used to run XPT at the Center for Puppetry Arts, where I wrote a show for people from Dad's Garage. And so that's essentially how I became like the gigantic extrovert that I am, or how I honed it, versus more quiet, decent people.
But I'm not off base by saying that both of these books were born not initially, but were discovered, for lack of a better word, by way of the first pages, correct?
That's correct. Yeah.
Yes.
Benji's was in there. And I very rarely ever would do this, but I had that 1.5 pages of The Weight of Ashes. And I just told the moderator to put it at the back end if there was time, to make sure that we could get, use all the time properly, to go ahead and read it. And we happened to get through everything. So we both were actually read in the same first pages critique, with our publisher that we didn't know was going to be our publisher sitting on the panel.
And does everybody at home know what first pages is? I'm assuming yes, maybe.
First pages is a very common thing you'll see at a number of writing conferences. For those who don't know, it's attendees submit anonymously page of their manuscript, and it is read by a moderator to a panel of, usually it's just literary agents. We're usually a mix of literary agents and publisher representatives, and they hear it for the first time. So first time cold, and it is terrifying. And at James River Writers, I did it several times and got torn to shreds every single time. And it is a gut check, and and yet a necessary thing, because the first page is so important.
I would never subject myself to that.
And yet you read them.
That's different. Reading them is not different, And Benji, what was your experience doing first pages? Was it
this book's first page was not the first time that I did first pages. I got ripped apart the very first time that I did it. And I have to say, though, that it is entirely worth the risk, because I often say, in terms of critique groups or things of that sort, if you can justify why you made the choices that you did, even if another reader didn't understand it, then you're confident enough in your own work to be able to move forward with it. And at the same time, if a table full of professionals is all agreeing on the same point about, whether there needs to be a sex scene on the first page of your book, for instance, not that anyone would ever do that. Oh wait, I did. Then it's worth the risk and the payoff. What you get when first pages for Impacted, because it was anonymous and because only a handful of people who were sitting next to me knew what was coming. Those people, when the panel went well, and when most everyone understood it, except for this one poor woman who didn't understand, and no one wanted to explain to her that what was happening was a sex scene, it rippled both within myself and within my life, so that I immediately had people who I knew wanted to talk to me about the book, because if someone likes something there on the panel, they will literally say, whoever wrote this, come find us.
Yeah.
We've as people from Broadleaf, we have had to track down people like Christine Rudolph, who had a first page but wasn't there in the room. We were able to find her and connect her with the person who is her agent now, just on the basis of the response that she got from first pages. Which is,
again, that's why first pages, when you go to a conference, it's so important to you just have to do it. And maybe you won't end up getting read, because sometimes there's just too many of them. But I do want to say what makes Benji such a great writer is that I remember watching him sitting in the front row, even though no writer who has submitted to the first pages is going to sit in the front row, but Benji does. And he sits in the front row with his notepad, and he listens to every single bit of feedback, and he's sitting there just furiously scribbling down, because he's taking notes based on the feedback other people are getting, not just his own. And you can learn so much from just listening. It's great.
And can we say that this is the Cinderella story then? That you both had your first pages read and doing a little bit of an A to B, these books were then published. You found your publisher through these first pages, yes?
You did,
we found the same
the
publisher.
same publisher. Yes. And what's really remarkable about that is that we didn't even know we'd found the same publisher until like 6 months later.
It was February of 2020. We were both invited to a breakfast, but neither one of us was told that the other one was going to be there.
Yeah, and that's when we found out that our publisher, Story Plant, and Lou Aronica was there, and we're like, oh, he's publishing you too. Oh, okay, all right, cool.
Yes, it was like an episode of Blind Date, and I got set up with Zach, and I was like, wait, someone finally sees. But
it's a lifelong dream come true, Benji.
That's amazing. For those watching at home, I see your questions. Don't worry. I'd say if you have any, please put them in the Q&A section. We'll start that in probably like 5-ish minutes. But I want to throw one last question to these two before I start reading your cues for their A's. But it's the idea of like, there are a few things I want to say, and let's start with Zach. I feel like, having read Anointed before, and this notion of kind of the growth of an author, like the kind of evolution of an author. What I found really interesting from one book to the next, this feels like a very mature book, but still oddly kind of like rooted in its own, like the rules of fantasy are still at play, but it's a little bit more grounded, I guess. And I'm curious where fantasy, and fantasy is a very broad scope, and we're living under an umbrella where both The Weight of Ashes and Anointed can kind of coexist. And you're working on a new fantasy triptych, trilogy. I mean, like, fantasy seems to play very much in your wheelhouse. So I'm curious about the kind of the variations therein between The Weight of Ashes and your previous fantastical works.
Yeah, I think pretty much consciously when I sit down to write, I'm always looking to write something that is not at all like real life. I get enough of that. So I want to be able to have some sense of escapism into another world, another place with other, magical or mystical things. The Weight of Ashes was a surprise. I had no plans on writing anything like that. Literally that first page and a half, just it possessed me. I wrote it. It is probably like within a couple words exactly the same as when I wrote it. And it evoked such strong imagery to me that I knew I had to tell the rest of the story when I could. I always wanted to have, I grew up reading Stephen King and Edgar Allan Poe, and I loved horror, and I loved that kind of darkness behind, the realism that's presented, and sort of fantastic elements too. So I just incorporated in that, and though there are elements that will certainly come off as sort of fantasy light or speculative fiction, maybe even, I wanted to keep enough mystery in there as to what it was that we were marching toward. But fantasy will always play a part in everything I write.
Interesting. Benji, what I find interesting is that even with the humor, and I think because of the humor and the kind of the dark streak that channels through it, the broad sweeping statement that I want to make for your novel is that it kind of partakes in, I'm sure there's someone here who could speak more eloquently about this than I can, but I feel like there's something to be said about like Southern Gothic, but kind of like the kind of modern Gothic, the modern Southern Gothic. I'm blanking on authors' names, but like, what is it? Henry Cruz? Like there are certain authors who evoke a contemporary sensibility of the Gothic, but it feels so now. I don't know, like I don't want to use a cinematic reference when we're talking about novels, but
you're
I
fine.
couldn't
You
help
don't
but
have to. Oh, go on.
Like Blood Simple, like there's a certain kind of I don't know, like I want you to talk to me about the notion of Southern Gothic and where it is today, and maybe where your book, if you agree, kind of falls into it.
All right. What I was trying to write essentially was a sort of neo-noir type book, something that evoked Jim Thompson, Population 1280, or we were talking about Philip Marlowe books earlier this week. But that dealt with like pulpy 1940s, just blunt language. And my favorite Southern Gothic writers who evoke that same sort of sensibility, and the one who is my favorite, my absolute favorite, that I unfortunately can't call modern anymore because he died in 1990, is Michael McDowell, who wrote this book called The Elementals, which he also wrote Beetlejuice, and he wrote I think A Treatment for the Nightmare Before Christmas. But if you remember the house from Beetlejuice being surrounded by sand and the worms coming up out of the sand and attacking the old Gothic house, there are elements of that echo both through The Elementals and what is, in my opinion, his best work, Blackwater, which is a 6-volume serial series that he wrote in the 80s. He released one every 3 or 4 months. And I don't mean to get too in the weeds there, but the idea that he himself was a gay writer, Harvard educated, but he came out of Alabama, and literally came out of Alabama. It gives you a sense, and just being in the South, I mean, our literature's just better, but being in the South also gives everyone, whether you're gay or straight, like whether you have secrets in general, it gives you this elaborate way of creating a facade for yourself and who you pretend to be versus who you are. And then there are those of us who I like Southern Gothic writers or noir writers who like the darkness of secrets, but also like the twistiness behind how far people will go to hide them, and the humor inherent in just blatant hypocrisy in everyday life.
Yeah. No, that's great.
And Flannery O'Connor, obviously, but yeah.
The Elementals is such an amazing book. You're making me want to read it again. You would pick Blackwater over Elementals?
Hell yes. I'm so sorry. It comes from the fact that the Elementals dwells with a family essentially for a weekend after one of the best opening scenes that I've ever read, which is straight up terrifying for no reason. And then there's a difference though in Blackwater. Blackwater takes place over the course of 70 years and 3 generations, and it plays into the Dallas and Knots Landing fan in me because it evokes something where the sins of the parents are revisited upon the children. And in this case, like, the crimes and the murders that one generation commits start to literally haunt the house of the people in generations after. And it's the only soap opera that I've ever read that had sea monsters in it.
There is that. Gentlemen, I have been defending you tirelessly from our audience. They have been banging down our digital doors with questions. Are you ready?
Fire away.
Here we go. We're going to start off with Jessica. Jessica asks, since you both sold your books at a First Pages critique at the Broadleaf conference, what is your favorite page of your book? Is it the first page?
Benji, you want that first?
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, I my whole entire book was born out of that first page, and though there are definitely pages in there that I love, I feel like that first page sets the tone for everything.
My entire book exists because I got a sentence stuck in my head that is in the middle of the first page.
Mm-hmm.
That's
And it's a
interesting.
sentence that I can't say in polite company.
This is on Facebook Live right now. So unless you
No,
want to like
Mark,
deep six the
I
Broadleaf
think
page.
Mark Zuckerberg is watching.
Mark Zuckerberg's heard that sentence before.
Mark Zuckerberg, what is it? Anyway,
Zuckerberg.
whatever.
David asks a question for Benji. Benji, you referenced Waverly as the city where your story is based. Is this a real place or is it fictitious? I wondered if you came up with the city's title because its similarity to the character Wade. Wade and Waverly flowed nicely when it was read.
The town where my story is based is actually Buford, Georgia. But I can't call Buford, Georgia, and set all sorts of horrible, horrible criminal activity there, even though all sorts of horrible criminal activity have happened in Buford, Georgia. I made up a city because Buford doesn't have a hospital. I didn't want anyone to think that I'd actually based all of my characters upon real people, even though if you march through my history or march through my head, you'll probably see seeds of lots of people everywhere. And so Waverly is just the name of a street, I think, that was between here and my office when I was writing my book. And in addition to that, there's a movie that I believe Allison Anders directed called Grace of My Heart, where there's a singer that Ileana Douglas plays, and she changes her name to her stage name of Denise Waverly. So yes.
The man is an encyclopedia of film.
Zach, just so you know, David goes on to say thanks for the plug for JRW, but you need to move up to Richmond staff.
Nope. I'm going to be where I'm going to be. That ship has passed. Not to mention, I have my family now, so I'm good.
He does ask you a question, Zach. Did you submit that first page from Weight of Ashes to the JRW conference? Just curious.
Actually, I did, because I went to that conference. That would have been 2019 when I submitted it. When it was that might have been 2018. I'm sorry. When I submitted it at my own conference, and then I would have gone after that to the JRW. So I submitted it, but it wasn't read.
Okay.
Because there are a bajillion people that go there and a bajillion people that submit. Benji seems to have a question.
I have a question for Zach.
Okay. Everybody brace yourself.
My favorite character in your book is Gordon.
Okay.
And I, just because he's a very layered yet despicable villain to me, where did he come from?
I appreciate that question. So Gordon is a layered character, and Gordon is the villain. He is also named and created from my best friend when I was a kid, a very troubled kid who wasn't quite as much of an ass as this Gordon is, but was borderline. And when I was 17, he killed himself, and that has always stuck with me. And I didn't intend, when I started writing this, to create a character based on him, but it began to feel very necessary to me that I do that. And actually in doing this, I began to realize that 30 years after the fact, I was still trying to process that loss. And And so I feel like there was some sense of therapy and closure to being able to understand my best friend a little bit better, and to try my hardest in the end to treat the character based on him with a level of respect that I feel like, first of all, a lot of villains don't get in books, and secondly, that I may not have given him for everything that he was going through.
Interesting. Marianne has a question for both of you. Tell us how your stories started. Where did you have the first seed of the idea? Did it take over your minds until you started writing? How did you start from that seed?
I had that inappropriate sentence stuck in my head.
Oh. Go ahead, Benji. Just everybody be aware that, no, I'm just joking. We're all adults. Go ahead.
Oh, you're having me read the sentence. Oh, fun.
I'm having you read it. I mean, we've plugged it enough. Go ahead.
All right, so this is on the first page. This was the sentence that 4 agents all of a sudden immediately started circling in red ink. Because Wade couldn't unfuck his dentist or reverse the Prius down the road to hell he'd been traveling for 2 months, he had to come up with another solution. I had the phrase "unfuck the dentist" stuck on my cork board here in the middle of my living room for ages. I was just going to write a short story for Shotgun Honey about a woman who was cheating on her husband with a dentist. And then I realized I'm not a woman. I am not married. I do not know that experience. I cannot write enough of that experience for it to come across accurately. I cannot live in that character's head enough to speak in that character's voice. What I do know is how to be a confused, closeted kid with too many secrets. And so I just kind of piled on the complications onto some variation of myself. And that is, and added murder. And that's where my book came from. I have never killed a dentist yet.
Yet.
I think, much like I had said before, I didn't know I was going to write the story. I just had that first scene in my head. And after I wrote it, I knew that there was something to tell there, but I was also working on my fantasy project with, some editors and needed to actually get it where I could move on. So it was like, I had that read in 2018 at the conference, and it was like the next conference when I was sitting next to Lou, and he was like, "So have you finished this book yet? Because I want to read it." And I was like, "Oh, I should probably write that." I had 3 scenes in my head. One was the one I had written. One was actually based on a song, like a prayer by Madonna, and a lot of my books actually start with a song. And I had a scene around that, and then there was another, like the singular emotional point of the story. I had one scene in my head that I just knew was going to be terrible to write, and I knew I had to write it at the same time. So it was those 3 things that I built the story around.
It's amazing. Helen has a question, and she asks, other than the first pages, what's the best way to find an agent?
It's still conferences. I think there are certainly a lot of modern ways to it. It depends on how adept you are at Twitter, because they have like the hashtag Pit Mad and things like that, where pitch fest sort of things that happen on Twitter. But I think in terms of being able to get that face-to-face or even virtually face-to-face experience, that going to conferences or going to anything where agents are going to be, where you can pitch, is the best thing. Not just to meet the agent and possibly get an agent, but because the more you do it, first of all, the more you're going to see literary agents as the human beings they actually are. And 2, the more you're going to become comfortable with what your story is about, because you have to pitch it. And until you know what your story is about and can pitch it in a way that is actually appealing to an agent, you're going to find you're treading hard. So I will always preach conferences.
If I can add to that, I'm going to go ahead and say that in addition to attending conferences, often it is a good idea to work or volunteer at conferences because you can pay to talk to an agent for 10, 15 minutes, and you can pitch, or you can volunteer, you can work, you end up attending more conferences, meeting more of your community, meeting more people, and developing relationships, so that even when you have just a kernel of an idea, or if you pitch a book that doesn't turn into a book, you're getting an opportunity to show people what your voice is. You're getting people an opportunity to see how you work and what your personality is. And so what I do is I try to be as friendly as possible without being horribly creepy. And I sometimes don't succeed at that everywhere I go.
I mean, I'll just say, this is not John Grisham style, but like, I've been very fortunate to attend a few conferences, and something very particular about Broadleaf is that it is so community based that, like, I feel the personality of the conference itself is kind of imbued in the day-to-day, in the kind of weekend, in the experience. And that's not necessarily true of every conference. Like, you want to feel like there's a personality there, that there's a heart and a soul there. But so much of it seems to be just kind of like, get to the next thing, or let's look at that bestseller. Where, like, I genuinely feel as if, Broadleaf has not only brought the community into the experience, but brought the authors into the community. Best-selling, like, big authors, and like, it's amazing how, like, it just feels, the experience itself feels very balanced in a way that not a lot of others have or are. So kudos to Broadleaf.
Now, Zach, I'm trying to remember, was it the first year or the second year where all of the sack lunches accidentally got raw cookies instead of regular, and then we all just had to commiserate together and sit together in order to just sort of make it into the largest running gag of all time?
It was the first conference. The second one is when they showed up with bags with fruit flies in them.
Oh, good God.
Yes. So we didn't serve those, but yes, that was our experience. Anyway.
So
awkwardness breeds familiarity, as it just did once again.
And stories to tell. Gentlemen, we're getting to the tail end of our evening, so I'm gonna do that awful thing that some virtual panels do. I'm gonna ask a question to you both, but before I do, please, the next time you go to the bookstore, your local independent bookstore, you should be picking up both of these books. Impacted is now out as of yesterday, Tuesday. So this is 2 days in. You need to get it if you haven't already. This is I'm going to get it wrong. I'm totally going to get it wrong.
Let me just jump in here to save you, because I finally settled on an answer for this one, but it was supposed to be July 13th. But because of the pandemic, there are a lot of printer delays, and it hit mine. And so instead of July 13th, the release date is now August 10th. However, I do have events on the 24th at Eagle Eye and the 26th at Foxtail, and books will be available for those. So they will be available for August 10th, but the pub date is now August 10th.
There you go. Now I'm going to put you both on the spot, and I'm going to ask you to both pitch the other's book. So tell us what it is, Zachary, about Impacted that is so valuable, and we need to go out and read this book now. And Benji, tell us why The Weight of Ashes is the best book of the year.
This is going to be interesting because unlike most panels, we've known each other for 21 years. So I feel like our answers may be affected like that. But one of the things that I've always appreciated about Benji that comes through in this book is the raw honesty with which he tells stories, even through trauma and pain. And so being able to see the journey of Wade through this story was the thing that stuck with me the most, because the kid, he's 17, he's confused and he's lost, but he's on a mission to do something. And in his journey, he encounters so much. And again, it's the raw honesty with which Benji writes that captivated me from the moment I started reading it.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
The Weight of Ashes evokes a nostalgia almost immediately. And it reminds me of my own childhood and the things that I loved when I was a child, things like Goonies and just Children on Adventures, Stand By Me, which was based on The Body. Just how much of an adventure it can occasionally be just to like leave your house and try to cross town when you don't have access to like anything immediately. So everything becomes an obstacle, and every new chapter introduces some new obstacle. And in addition to that, his scene with Like a Prayer is a really damn good scene, y'all. And only because I have been that child, never mind. But and plus, as I said earlier, the villain's really damn good. So that's why you should go and read The Weight of Ashes.
Sir.
Did I do okay?
Sold.
You did.
I'm in. Thank you very much for tuning in tonight. It has been wonderful to talk to you both. It has been wonderful to hear your stories, to share these stories with the rest of the people out there in the virtual world. I am
cut him off, Benji. Just cut him off, Benji. You're gonna do it.
I want to go to Waffle House now. I feel like we just take a little road trip, right?
Wait a damn second. You guys go.
You're not getting out of here that easy.
Go buy Whisper Down the Lane by Clay McLeod Chapman.
You can't disappear,
It just
Clay.
disappeared on us. It's a really good book, y'all. Go buy the remaking. Read that one. If you're a fan of like 70s and 80s horror movies, really seriously, go read it. He's very, very good. The reason that we asked him to be the moderator tonight is because we're both tremendous fans of his work. And he has written one of the best books of the year. And as a result of that, we are not letting him leave, just as the host so silently to shuffle off.
And much like having known Benji for 21 years, Clay and I met at the first James River Writers Conference, 2001, 2002, something like that. Catherine, maybe you can help me. But not only is he a fabulous and fantastic writer, I have had the privilege to get to know him, and he is equally so as a person. And it's an honor to know him. It's an honor to know Benji, and having the two of you on the screen with me has been a great joy.
This has been fantastic.
These two, it's like someone opens the door and someone's got to walk in, but it's just constantly after you. No, after you. You can we're still outside. This panel hasn't even started yet.
As long as it isn't one of those spinny fan doors, because if we were doing that, I would just stay outside of it because I'm terrified of those doors.
That's my foot got caught in one once, and that's why I walk this way.
See? Yeah.
All right. This is the assignment. We're gonna buy these books. We're gonna sign up for the Broadleaf Writers Conference in October, and we will see you right here, same time, same place in October.
October 16th and 17th.
Thank you very much for tuning in tonight. It's been a pleasure. Congratulations on the releases of both of your novels.
Thank you very much. And thank you everybody for being here.